All right, is this working now? Hopefully this is working now. All right, I think it's working now. So I just got done on Prime Kai's channel. And I'm not tired, so I figured I would do the stream because I haven't done a stream myself in a while. So obviously Donald Trump has been elected our next president, and me being a non-Trump fan at all, I figured we could watch some of his interviews. I was gonna watch the Bloomberg interview first, but I've already seen that myself, and I thought maybe his Joe Rogan interview might be a little more fun to go through. I don't know, I haven't seen it yet, so that's why I figured we'll do this. It's a long interview. I think both of them talk kind of slow, so hopefully we can like bump it up to 1.5. We'll see. And just talk about this and get to know our upcoming president a little bit more. Because in 2016, when he was originally elected, I was the last thing on my mind was politics. And I wasn't on the internet like this. I wasn't a YouTube watcher. I didn't start watching YouTube till like 2021. Like, I would use YouTube for listening to music and looking up how to do stuff or looking up stuff. I never like watched streamers or like used YouTube as a form of entertainment. And then during 2020, I was recommended Bailey Sarian, the makeup like true crime girl. And then I got into true crime, which led me to true crime panels, which led me to debate panels somehow. And like red pill shit. So, and here I am now. So yeah, so all this is kind of like newer to me, which I am fine with admitting. So yeah, I know enough about him where I disagree with many of his beliefs and perspectives and policies to the best of my knowledge. So good evening. Thanks for coming. So yeah, let's do this. All right, Joe Rogan, here we go.
Last week I did one of her last shows. I think maybe Thursday or Friday. That was a big deal being on Oprah's show. The last.
All right, cool. So I'm gonna skip over some of this, like The Apprentice, The Experience. Let's start The Bed. All right, I don't care about that. Let's go to here.
Everyone's aware of all this stuff. But what I want to get to is like, what was the experience once you got inside?
It was
like,
just
what did you think it was going to be like in terms of like your ability to govern?
Yeah.
Like, this is your first experience governing anything. You've never been a governor. You've never been a mayor.
Private stuff.
Business.
Yeah.
But now all of a sudden you're inside the White House.
The biggest thing was just that first moment of being in this hallowed. It was really a hallowed place to me. It was surreal. It was beyond. To me, that was the experience. It was a surreal experience, and then with time. That wears off. With time, it becomes, your place where you stay. And I was doing a lot of. I had two things that I really focused on: governing the country and survival. Because from the moment I won, before I got to office, all of a sudden, they came down. Nobody has ever been treated that way. And you see that. You see where in the Washington Post very early on they said, well, now the impeachment stuff starts. And it did. It literally started from the beginning. So I had survival and run the nation. I had a combination. Most people don't have the survival. They get in.
What did you expect, though, in terms of, like, once you got inside, you had to appoint all these people? Yeah. Like, how many appointments did you have to make?
Well, you have actually 10,000 appointments. Now, they're different. You have big ones, and then they appoint 100 people and 200 people. But the president really is involved with approximately 10,000 appointments. So you'll appoint a Secretary of State, and he or she will appoint a lot of people. So it's a lot. But in terms of major ones, you probably have like 100, but they're big ones. Treasury, State, military.
And how did you know who to appoint?
Well, I didn't. I had no experience. You have to understand.
So
I was there 17 times in Washington, and I never stayed over. According to the press, which I think is probably right, over the years, I was only there 17 times. I never stayed over. So now I'm sitting there, I'm saying, this place is gorgeous, but, I don't know anybody. It's like you you go to certain areas, and other areas, they may be great. Washington was great. Washington's not so great right now. We got to fix it. We got to make it better. A very dangerous place, very badly maintained place. We're going to make it great. We're going to make it better. We're going to bring it back. But
see, it's just like, it's kind of funny to me because I feel like one of the things I always hear Republicans saying that they like about Trump is he doesn't do all this like political stuff. He's not a politician, right? As he was just explaining, he had no experience. He didn't know who to appoint. He didn't know what to do. But then he'll like say shit like that, which is just so clearly like typical scripted political speech, saying like, oh, well, this is really bad and I'm going to make it better, and not saying how or even like specifically why, but more importantly, the how he's going to make it better. What is he going to do to make it better? He says these things, and for some reason he's been so effective at convincing Republicans and other people that he actually knows how to fix it, and he's actually going to. So whether or not like Democrats, including myself, think it's bullshit what he's saying, I cannot deny that he has effectively reached the people. And Democrats have been demonizing Trump and the issues that the Republicans and the people have been voicing, instead of offering our own solutions to these problems. So Republicans have been talking about corruption, right, within the government, inflation, the economy, immigration, the border, and also like radical wokeness. So kind of this like extreme identity politics and all of that being used against people, I guess like specifically white men and whatever. They feel left out, which like I see to a point. I see to a point where they're coming from, even though I feel like that's been like calmed down a little bit recently. But me not being a man, I guess like I can only take experiences from what men are saying, and I do hear lots of men saying this. So yeah, the people are voicing these issues, and Trump is telling them he's the one who can get it done. He's the one who can fix it. Meanwhile, Democrats have been demonizing that. They've been demonizing all of Trump's answers to these problems instead of offering our own solutions to these problems that people are voicing. So I think if we want to be effective, perhaps next time, or just, in the future, what we need to do is stop demonizing the other side so much and just offer solutions, and really like let the people know and understand that they can fix it, that we can fix their issues, and we hear their issues, and we're not just dismissing them and demonizing them. I think that's really what this election ultimately boils down to. I think there's a lot of other factors, a lot of other varying factors that played into why the Democrats lost, but I think that is a big one.
I wasn't a Washington guy. I was a New York guy. I was a New York builder, and I built buildings in New York, and I knew that whole world, but I didn't know the Washington world too well. And all of a sudden, you're supposed to be appointing top people. So,
what did you think it was going to be like?
Oh, but sorry, also real quick. But to my point, I do think there is kind of a double standard, because when Kamala says things like very like typical political speech, you know, she gets criticized for it and she gets called like untrustworthy and she doesn't seem authentic. But Trump really does the same thing. He just has a way of making it sound authentic for some reason. So I think we need to get down to the bottom of that as well.
Like versus like, did you have any ideas of what it was going to be like and what was different?
Well, I was always involved in politics, but usually from the standpoint of a donor. I was a donor. You know, I was a big donor. I gave money to politicians. I enjoyed politics.
Mostly Democrats, right?
Both, really, pretty much both. I actually pictures of Ronald Reagan and me when I was very young.
You were a Democrat until like what year?
I was a Democrat. I could get you the exact, but the early 90s. The early 90s. I switched over eventually. Actually, they had a reform party. I was thinking about doing that for a little while, but then fortunately I didn't because it's very hard. You know, it's a two-party system. And anytime you hear third party, I know you like RFK Jr. and so do I. He's a fantastic guy.
I do, but I thought that being an independent was nonsense.
It doesn't work. It doesn't work because even if you do great, you're not going to get Congress. In other words, you need now to say, okay, now I'll get half of Congress. They're never going to vote for you. So even if you got there, which is very hard, and I know how you feel about Bobby, and I feel the same way, and he's now with us. But it doesn't. It's pure and simple. It's a two-party system.
Right.
And somebody, I won't mention his name, but somebody spent $250 million trying to get the nomination as a Reform Party candidate or whatever, and they got just nowhere. You get eaten. You just get eaten. The system eats you alive.
Right.
So. So it was really somebody that not only was new to Washington, but was new to politics. So in the office of the presidency, over the years, all those presidents, you've had 92% were politicians and 8% were generals. General Eisenhower, General Washington, right? General George Washington, you had generals. So it's 8% no admirals, 8% generals, and 92% politicians. You know, they're politicians and they go on. So they never had a business guy or they never had a guy that wasn't elected to an office. They were all like Ronald Reagan was really, he was a movie actor, but he became the governor of California for, I think, 2 terms, and then he ran. So you'd never had a thing like this. But in terms of me, and sometimes I'd use it as an excuse, and I don't like having excuses actually, but I'd use it as an excuse. I had to rely on people that I respected or liked, but that I didn't know that well because I didn't know them that well. Some of those people I campaigned against because, when you have 18 people, we had mostly politicians running in the election, running in the primaries. And they got knocked out one by one, but I got to like some of them. Some of them I didn't like at all, and I don't like them now. And I'd rely on them, and I'd rely on other people. So all of a sudden, people would come in, I'd like to recommend so-and-so to be Secretary of State, and I'd have 3, 4 people recommend. One thing I can tell you, everybody wants the position.
Of course.
No, but sometimes I'll hear, a lot of people don't want to work with Trump because Trump is tough to work with, et cetera. Let me tell you, everybody wants to be any one of these positions. They die for it.
Of course.
Now, they don't want to be known. I mean, there's a particular guy in New York, primarily, very big, very successful, very strong, very political, although he's not a politician. He'd give anything to be Secretary of State, but if they ask him, no, I don't think I would do it. But in the meantime, begging for it, okay, begging. I believe you. Everybody wants it.
But
by the way, no matter what you do, but it's very dangerous to pick somebody outside of a politician because a politician's been basically vetted for years.
Right.
You pick a business guy, and they've never been vetted at all, and they're, the head of a big company or something, but they've never been vetted. You know nothing about his personal life. You know nothing about where he's been. When you put him in, it's a little bit dangerous because all of a sudden they get checked up, and you hear things that you're saying, wow, this is not going to work out too well. So it's very dangerous. Picking people that are outside of politics is somewhat dangerous.
So you're kind of stuck in a position where you have to pick established people. And then the problem with established people is established people are already indoctrinated into the system.
And they're stiffs in many cases. They're survivors. I find that,
What do you mean by stiffs? When you say stiffs?
They don't have nothing. They have nothing. Or they're smart and survive. One little thing. So there was a congressman years before I ran, and I was very close to him. And I needed a license on something, and he was very important in getting the license. But it was a little bit controversial, the license, this particular thing that was being licensed. But I was close to this guy and helped him and everything else. And I went to him, I said, I'd like to have your help. And he said, let me take a look at it. I said, ooh, that's not too good. But I really hope you can help. Anyway, he tapped me along for a long period of time and ultimately didn't do it. And I said, you are a stiff. You could have done this thing so easy, et cetera. But it was controversial. He was in Congress for many years, like 28 years. And, there's a reason when somebody's there for 28 years, you got to be sort of smart.
Right.
You have all the scandals. And I realized he was a survivor.
And so they never do anything controversial. They never take any chances or speak their opinion. It's outside of the...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes. And yet I don't disrespect him for it.
So
I actually respected the guy more in a certain way. I said,
because he did survive.
You know what? He's been there like for 28 years, and he made it through. A lot of people don't make it through.
It's a good way for non-exceptional people to survive.
Well, it is.
Yeah.
I mean, it certainly is.
So you're in there. You have 10,000 appointments you have to make. So you're getting advice from people. And at one point in time, did you have a moment in time where you realized, these are bad choices? Like, some of these people I shouldn't have had in there.
Oh, yeah. I think so. The one question that...
Yeah, as soon as I disagreed with him.
You'll ask me that people seem to ask, and I always come up with the same answer. The one mistake, because I had a lot of success, great economy, great everything. Everything was great. The military, we rebuilt it, biggest tax cuts in history, all this stuff. We had a great presidency. 3 Supreme Court justices. Most people get none. You pick them young. This way they're there for 50 years, right? So, even if a president is there for 8 years, oftentimes they never have a chance. I had 3. It was sort of the luck of the draw. But I will say that it always comes back to the same answer. The biggest mistake I made was I picked some people. I picked some great people, but you don't think about that. I picked some people that I shouldn't have picked. I picked a few people that I shouldn't have picked. And
neocons?
Yeah, neocons, or bad people, or disloyal people, or
people that were just
people
bad,
that were into the
people got bad advice.
Yeah, I mean, look, you're reading about him a little bit today. A guy like Kelly, who was a bully, but a weak person. You know more about bullies than anybody probably around because you deal in a certain sport where the bullies are exposed very quickly.
Yeah.
But he's bad. Bolton was an idiot, but he was great for me because I'd go in with a guy like a John Bolton. John Bolton. A friend of mine called me up. I was picking Bolton, and he's a very smart guy. His name is Phil Ruffin. He's a very rich guy from Las Vegas. He's a great card player. He doesn't play cards, but he's a great player. He's just a natural. Got poker sense, right? Good old poker sense. And Phil Ruffin is a very, very wise kind of a guy, and one of the richest people around, and has had great success and understands people. So it was in that I was picking Bolton, or I picked Bolton. He called up. He said, "Don't pick him. Why? He's a bad guy." Now, he wasn't in politics at all. He's in various businesses. He said, "He's a bad guy. It always works out bad with that guy." And I said, "Oh, man, I wish you told me this 2 weeks ago. I already hired him. He's here." And he was right. But he was good in a certain way. He's a nut job. And every time I had to deal with a country, when they saw this whack job standing behind me, they said, "Oh, man, Trump's going to go to war with us." He was with Bush when they went stupidly into the Middle East. They should have never done it. I used to say it as a civilian. So I always got more publicity than other people. And it wasn't like I was trying. In fact, I don't know exactly why. Maybe you can tell me why.
Oh, I could definitely tell you. You said a lot of wild shit.
Maybe. Maybe
you said a lot of wild shit, and then CNN, in all their brilliance, by highlighting your wild shit, made you much more popular.
Yeah.
And they boosted you in the polls because people were tired of someone talking in this bullshit, pre-prepared politician lingo. And even if they didn't agree with you, they at least knew whoever that guy is, that's him. That's really him. Yeah. When you see certain people talk, certain people in the public eye, you don't know who they are. You have no idea who they are. It's very difficult to know. You see them in conversations. They have these pre-planned answers. They say everything. It's very rehearsed. You never get to the meat of it. One of the beautiful things about you is that you freeball. Like, you get out and you do these huge events and you're just talking and you're making. We've highlighted you on the show many times when you did this Biden impression where he's walking around, he doesn't know what he's doing. It's funny. It's stand up. It's funny stuff. But it's like you were making fun of Elon one time. You were doing an Elon impression. It's great. You have like comedic instincts. Like when you said to Hillary, "You'd be in jail." Like, that's great timing.
Yeah.
But it's like that kind of stuff was unheard of as a politician. Like, no one had done that. And I think
it's funny. You need.
So he mentions this Bill Bolton guy, and again, me not being like a huge political person, didn't know who this guy was. And apparently, a few months ago, around the beginning of the year, so pretty long time ago, I guess. Around the beginning of the year, he released a memoir that says Trump is unfit to be president. So former U.S. National Security Advisor John Bolton, oh God, I don't know that word, excoriated? I don't know, excoriated former President Donald Trump as an utterly self-interested man who would punish personal enemies and appease adversaries, Russia and China, in a new edition of his memoir released on Tuesday. Bolton, who served in Trump's White House in 2018 and 2019, accused the Republican presidential frontrunner of having no political philosophy or coherent policy outlook. If re-elected, Trump could leave the NATO security alliance, curb support to Ukraine despite Russia's 2022 invasion, embolden China to blockade Taiwan and generally pursue isolationism, Bolton warned. Quote, Trump is unfit to be president, Bolton wrote in a new foreword to the room where it happened, his account of the 17 months he spent as Trump's national security advisor. If his first 4 years were bad, a second 4 will be worse. Trump really only cares about retribution for himself, and it will consume much of a second term. These are all quotes. Trump's senior advisor Jason Miller said, for someone who professes to have such great disdain for President Trump, book deal Bolton sure has found a way to grift off the relationship. And then Bolton also says he cares almost exclusively about his own interests. He also makes a case that Trump revered by the right for appointing Supreme Court justices who overturned the 1973 Roe v. Wade ruling. So this guy clearly does not like Trump, did not have a good experience working with Trump. Now, I guess Trump's team is trying to turn that around and say that he just wants like a book deal, so he's grifting. But this seems to be a common thing of the people who were in Trump's administration. And I guess you could make the argument that, well, you know, like Trump is saying here, he didn't know people to a point. He was kind of guided to these people. So since he didn't really consciously select people, if what he is saying is true, then that could be why there's like a higher rate of people not wanting to work with him again, because they didn't really get along in the first place. They just didn't know it yet. Or it could just be, you know, Trump mouthing these people because they bad-mouthed him and then calling them bad picks. So I guess it could go either way. And I don't know, like, if maybe I'm being unfair. Like, maybe it's the case with most presidents that if they disagree with you or they give you pushback, they turn around and call you a bad pick. I'm not really sure, so I just want to point that out. Hi, Moo. Okay.
At least the attitude of a comedian when you're doing this business. This is a very dangerous business, first of all. It's a very tough business.
It's the most dangerous business.
It's the most, for a job?
Yes. I mean, other than going to war and being a firefighter or being a cop, it's the most dangerous business.
It's the most dangerous. Being president is the most dangerous.
Especially you. I mean, you haven't even got to the election. There's been 2 assassination attempts. And they've brushed those out of the news like it was nothing.
Yeah, they'd rather not talk about them.
Imagine if there was assassination attempts on Biden, how hard people would be attacking the right, how they would be trying to get guns taken away from people. They would try to ramp up gun laws. They would try to figure out some way to blame you. If there was attacks if Biden got shot in the ear, we would have never heard the end of it.
But I think he's in good shape because it's only consequential president.
Why do we just assume that? I don't know why we assume that. Like, I guess there's a world, of course, obviously, where that could be the case, but why would we assume that?
If you take a look at what's happened, look.
Like, honestly, during an election cycle, sorry, I don't know, I'm twisting my words up so much tonight. News moves very quickly. So especially when like Biden dropped out and now Kamala's here and Trump got shot at, and then there was like a second almost attempt. So political news recycles very quickly. Just news in general. There's lots of crazy things that happen that people move on from, sometimes only a few days later, and stop talking about when it's like a pretty big deal. So, I don't know.
I'm for having countries pay us billions and billions and trillions even dollars. I took in hundreds of billions of dollars from China. Nobody took in 10 cents, not one other president. I do things that make it, that don't necessarily make me so popular. I just do what's right. And when you do that, you're more, look at Iran. We would have never had the attack on Israel at all. Iran was broke. I told China, if you buy, you can't do business in the United States under any circumstance. We're going to go cold turkey with China. Some people think that would have been a good idea anyway. But if you buy any oil, 1 barrel of oil from them, you're not doing business. I said that to many countries. Iran was broke. They had no money for Hezbollah. They had no money for Hamas. They had no money. But I make myself, I understand what I'm doing. You make yourself a target. And it's a very dangerous business. But if you just look at statistically, so I saw a thing, I don't know if it's right, but 1/10 of 1% for a race car driver. It's a pretty dangerous business, right?
Yeah.
1/10 of 1% for a bull rider. I tell you, to me,
You're talking death?
These guys that ride the bulls is worse than UFC. It's worse.
Yeah.
These guys, you see these big monster bulls, and you see it in slow motion where the foot is like, an inch away from the head. If it hits him, the guy's gone. But they die. They die.
So 1/10 of 1% die. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, 1/10 of 1% die.
Right.
And they certainly get hurt badly. Really, they can't walk after a certain period of time. But with a president, if you look at
the amount of assassination attempts.
And attempts, too.
Yeah.
And attempts. No, it's a very dangerous position. I never thought of that, by the way, when I did it. You don't tend to think.
Did you just assume because people loved you on The Apprentice, they were going to love you as a president?
I figured it would be so easy. It's
well,
very
it probably
interesting.
would have been if the media didn't attack you the way they did. If they didn't conflate you with Hitler. Even today, Kamala was talking about you and Hitler. They're going to take what you said about Robert E. Lee. Oh, Donald Trump wishes the South won.
That's right. He loves Robert E. Lee.
They love to take things out of context and distort things. But
they don't even have to take them out. They make them up entirely. Okay,
they do
make
that
them.
too.
But it's interesting when you mentioned I was very popular, and all those people loved me. Some of these women, they're so stupid, and Joy, she would every time she'd see me, I'd be in the theater or something, and she says, "You have to be on the show again. Come on, let's go."
She loved you.
She loved me.
That episode where
By the way, Whoopi,
people should watch that episode just to see what we're talking about. Like I said, we don't want to get a copyright strike, so we're not going to put it up. But
okay.
If you watch the episode, it's bananas. It's like an alternative universe, and it's only
but Whoopi
9 years ago.
Whoopi loved me.
you. Gives you a hug and a kiss.
And how about that other one, the new one on there, the one from my administration? She writes me a letter. You're the greatest president. She leaves. She worked as an assistant press secretary. I hardly knew her, but she leaves and she writes me this gorgeous letter. What's her name? She was, I don't even know. Anyway, she was in the administration. She's on now currently. Sits on the far right-hand side, whatever the hell her name is. And she writes a letter, the most beautiful letter. She's quoted in the paper. He's a consequential. He was the greatest president, blah, blah, blah. Then all of a sudden she goes to the View. She started hitting the hell out of me because they won't hire her unless. I've had many people go on CNN and they call and said, I don't know what to do. They want to pay me a lot, but I have to be negative on you. I said, be negative. That's okay. There are guys on CNN. They won't hire them. Sean Duffy is a congressman, and he retired. He got a good job with CNN, but he was only positive about Trump. So they kept him, but they would never put him on. I respect what he did. He could have gone, next.
I just don't know why, if we're so hesitant to trust politicians, trust the government, trust the elites, trust the experts, the authorities, we're so unwilling and hesitant and skeptical of trusting these people. But when Trump says it, it's immediately truth. It must be true. There's no skepticism from people on the right. Of course, people on the left, obviously, there's a lot. But why would I trust what he's saying right now? You know what I mean? The other side lies too. They do. Kamala lied a lot. Lots of her advertisements weren't truthful, and same with many of Trump's advertisements. But so why is it I don't know, it just seems like there's a double standard. I don't know why I would trust what Trump is saying here any more than I would trust what somebody on a major news station would say. They both clearly have motives. Trump arguably has the largest motive right now. So, yeah, that just has confused me too. And I've seen other smaller circles that tend to lean right do this as well. Yeah, so I was going to give an example, but let's move on.
I tell people, go negative. Let my friends make the money.
Well,
it's just so crooked. The press is so crooked.
It's crooked, but it's also they're diminishing themselves. They're killing all their credibility, and it's opening up the credibility to new media. It's opening up the credibility to independent media. All these.
The worst I've ever seen, though, and I've seen the worst. I mean, I've been a part of it. I've seen the worst. Kamala goes on 60 Minutes, gave an answer that a child wouldn't give. It was so bad, and 60 Minutes took the answer out. They took the whole. And they put another answer in.
They edited it deceptively.
Which didn't make sense either, but it was better.
How do you know? How do you know that? If they took it out and replaced it, how would you know that?
They took it wasn't editing. It was fraud.
Yeah.
This was not editing.
Right.
Editing is where I'll give an answer and they'll take a couple of words and change them around, or they might even take a sentence or two off, which is very bad. But it's sort of bad. I'd give an answer which was a very good answer. I always talk about, I like to give long the weave. I like to
you like to weave things in.
But when you do the weaves, and you have to be very smart to do weaves. When you do the weave, look at this. Just in this one thing, we're talking about little pieces all over here, but it always ends up.
Home.
No, it comes back home. For the right people. For the wrong people, it doesn't come back home, and they end up in the wilderness, right? but they can take my answer, and you know what? They may take a little piece of it out or something, and they use the term, "Yes, we want to save time." Well, it's not. But I've never heard. I think it's the biggest scandal in broadcast history. What happened to CBS? So you have CBS 60 Minutes. That's a news program. It's not.
Can he keep just one coherent thought? Wasn't he just talking about the weaving, and getting lost in the wilderness and never bringing it back home full circle? That's exactly what he's doing.
An entertainment program. It's under their news. It's the head of their news thing. She gives an answer that shows that she's essentially incompetent. And they took the answer. Could you imagine them doing that?
We can show it if you want people to see it. Can we show it? No.
Sure.
We get in trouble. We'll get copyright strike. Okay.
Listen,
anyone can find it, but it's drastic. But what was interesting was the other full version was available initially. It was like a preview.
Somebody made a big mistake.
Somebody put that preview out there.
Some kid put the preview out.
Exactly.
And then the bosses did this or that. And then all of a sudden they said, we got a problem.
Exactly.
Okay, so I guess that's what happened. So that's how he knows, is there was a preview put out and then the answer was changed. Again, I don't know. I haven't seen this, so I guess I have to look into it, or I could just take their word for it. But my trust is just so low, because usually when I double check these things, they very often turn out to be wrong. So, or they're missing something. They're not including a key factor into the equation. So, I don't know.
And then
they got caught by mistake.
Well,
don't you think that's a bit, to me, and don't forget, this is election interference and fraud. And it's 60 Minutes, it's their news division.
Election interference. You don't think Elon Musk owning the largest social media platform in the world and then talking about bringing him into your presidency, you don't call that election interference? And now I'm not particularly saying it is, but when you weigh the scales, I don't know. There's a lot of accusations about things Elon has been doing on Twitter that seem to have had an impact in the election, or at least intentionally. The intent was to impact the election, people's votes. So I don't know. I just don't want to hear Trump complaining about election interference about small shit like this.
So it's a big deal.
They give those licenses out
it's
for
not
free.
A big deal.
They should pay a fortune. They're worth a fortune. They give them out for free because they're using the public airwaves. With cable, you don't have that. The cable's different. But, it's just a different deal. But with the networks, they give those licenses. They're worth billions of dollars. They give them out free, but you have to be honest and all. That was bad. I think that David Muir and that woman that was aside, I never even heard of her, but they kept interrupting me. It was I said, how many people am I debating here? I got this one and I got you two. But he went after me 11 different times. It's interesting. I always thought he was a nice guy, but he's just like the rest of them,
Well, that's his job, unfortunately, and I'm sure
not when they're
what they
wrong.
want. You're right. Well, the problem was they fact-checked you and they didn't fact-check her. And
Not
one of the
at
most
all.
egregious examples of that was when she said that there are no troops right now deployed in war zones.
Yeah.
There's a very famous viral video that went online of troops in a war zone saying, well, what the fuck are we then? because there's thousands of them. Dan Crenshaw, the congressman, posted on his Instagram all of the various examples of troops that are deployed, thousands and thousands of troops that are currently deployed.
Stupidly deployed.
But the point is, if this is going to be an actual real debate and not a propaganda exercise, if it's going to be a real debate, you have to fact check everybody.
So
like if someone says maybe she
to...
thought there was no, which is also a problem. So it's one of two things. It's either it was not true, it was a lie on purpose, which is terrible, or it was the opposite. It was ignorance, which is also terrible.
It could be like how they're categorizing what specifically is a war zone. It could be that too.
When I said crime is soaring, he said, no, crime has gone down. I said, where did you hear that one? Crime has gone down. I mean, I'm debating with this guy. But I've had that.
This is just like what pisses me off too. It's always just like, we're the victims. Everything is so unfair. Media is always lying against us and blah, 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 blah. It's just like, as if they don't do the same shit. And it's never, I don't know. It's just like never their fault. He didn't lose the debate because of him. He lost the debate because the fact checkers were being biased, and it was what did Joe Rogan call it? A media propaganda machine or something, not a debate.
Well, there was amended FBI statistics that came out after that showed that crime had gone up substantially.
And by the way, the statistics were a fraud, because when they put out the statistics, they didn't include some of the worst places. They didn't include some of the worst cities, some of the most deadly places. But when the real numbers came out, I turned out to be right. But
you turned out to be right, but then there's another problem. Unreported crime is way up. Because people...
The real numbers. What real numbers? Where? All he says. He just says these things without backing them up. And then people believe it. I don't know why he's so effective at convincing people without supporting facts or evidence. This is what's very confusing to me. I think it's simply because he doesn't talk, like the way he speaks is very candid and unpolitician-esque. When Kamala speaks, she tries to look very professional and have that like presidential tone to her and stuff. When Trump talks, he speaks very candidly and casually, while saying all the same political speech bullshit that the other candidates say and other politicians say. It's not what he says, it's how he says it.
Look, the morale that the police department has in a lot of these cities where they've done this defund the police bullshit. The morale of these poor cops, it's fucking horrible. Yeah. It's the dumbest idea of all time. But what they've done is they've made these cops feel terrible.
Defund the police was like 4 years ago, and it like when most people said that, it didn't even mean like literally defund the police. I know there were some people who maybe wanted that, but most people, when they were talking about defund the police, they were talking about like reallocating or figuring out police funds and mostly police reform. I agree, it was a dumb slogan, like many slogans are. They're dumb slogans that don't necessarily represent the movement. But it was kind of like, I guess the way lots of people look at it, it was a dumb movement overall. But I believe in police reform. I think most people probably believe in police reform. So yeah, again, like you could call this propaganda if you wanted to. It's just, I don't know.
They're like good cops. I think cops are just like everybody else. Most of them are great. It's like everybody else. But
oh yeah, my point is like nobody's talking about this anymore though. This is from 4 fucking years ago. So it's just annoying.
If you run into one carpenter and he does a shitty job in your house, you say carpenters fucking suck, but they don't suck. Most of them are great, and that's the key thing with cops. But the point is, like, they did all of these things in this very foolish way, and these cops are suffering the consequences of it.
If they make the wrong decision, they're going to end up on the front page of every newspaper in the country, and they're going to lose their house and their pension.
All right, this is just about police shit. Let's go to tariffs.
She changed. She changed 15 policies. In fact, I'm going to send her a MAGA cap.
She stole your idea about no tax for tips.
I came up with this idea that honestly nobody ever heard of. Now, it took her 2 months, but you know what? All of a sudden,
it caught fire.
And she just put it into a little speech.
Yeah.
Well,
it became
but
popular.
I think we still have that issue. I think that issue is a good one for us. But no, we have a lot of good issues. We had the other day. Think of how simple some of these things are. We're trying to get cars built in the United States. Detroit has been really tough. It's been a disaster. They have a huge factory, a huge car auto plant being built by China in Mexico. Make cars, sell them in the United States, put everybody out of business. Right, here we go again. I said, if that plant is there when I'm president, I will put 100 or 200% tariffs on every car. They'll be unsaleable in the United States. And they just announced they're not going to build the plant because they think I'm going to win. Think of it. They're not going to build the plant. This was the biggest plant in the world. It would have more than all of Michigan makes. That's how big. This is what we're getting to. And I said, if that plan goes up, I want them to understand if I win, I'm going to tax those cars at the rate of 100 or 200% apiece so that you won't be able to sell them in the United States. They just announced they're not going to build the plant.
Yeah, I read this.
I did a big favor for our country by doing that. And I'm not even there yet. To me, the most beautiful word, and I've said this for the last couple of weeks, in the dictionary today, is the word tariff. It's more beautiful than love. It's more beautiful than anything. It's the most beautiful word. This country can become rich with the proper use of tariffs.
Did you just float out the idea of getting rid of income taxes and replacing it with tariffs?
Well, okay.
Were you serious about that?
Yeah, sure. Why not? Because our country was the richest relatively in the 1880s and 1890s. A president who was assassinated named McKinley. He was the tariff king. He spoke beautifully of tariffs. His language was really beautiful. We will not allow the enemy to come in and take our jobs and take our factories and take our workers and take our families unless they pay a big price. And the big price is tariffs. And he'd speak like that, but he was right. And then around in the early 1900s, they switched over stupidly to, frankly, an income tax. And you know why? Because countries were putting a lot of pressure on America. We don't want to pay tariffs. Please don't you? Believe me, they control our politicians. If you look at the kind of numbers that these guys make then and now. But we had a commission meeting in the, I think it was 1887. Think of this problem. We were so rich.
Okay, so this says, and again, maybe I'm wrong. I'm looking into this car plant thing. All right, Chinese electric car maker BYD denies pause on Mexico plant plans. This is from September 3rd. Mexico City. China's electric automaker BYD said on Tuesday that it has not postponed any decision regarding its planned factory in Mexico, denying a report from earlier in the day. In a news story, Bloomberg reported that BYD has tapped the brakes on scouting locations for the plant and that the company would not announce its investment plan until after the U.S. elections in November. BYD hasn't postponed any decision about a Mexico plant. BYD, America's head Stella Lee, said in a statement, she described Mexico as a very relevant market for the company, explaining the plant would produce cars to be sold locally, not in the United States, or for export elsewhere. And then a lot of these other articles around the same time say that BYD halts Mexico plant, blah, 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 blah. So, but I guess unless something has changed between now and September, the BYD, America's head Lee, Stella Lee, is saying that this is not true and they weren't even going to export cars to the United States. So I don't know. Maybe this is bullshit, but
we had so much money. We didn't know what to do. So they set up a blue ribbon commission on tariffs. And the sole purpose is what to do with all the money we had. We were so rich because we were taxing other people for coming in and taking our jobs. And China does it. That's what China did. If you want to open a factory and sell cars, if you build a factory here or have a factory, they don't take our cars. They wouldn't take our cars. But if you build a plant in China, you can do that. Elon did that. By the way, Elon is great. That guy is such a great guy. I think you're a fan of Elon.
Him.
He is from a different planet. He's the greatest guy. That rocket coming in.
Yeah.
Elon did that. Elon does that. He builds plants in China. He's a great guy. And doesn't this kind of go against like capitalism and the free market like a little bit? Well, I guess like not really. Imposing a tariff doesn't make it illegal to build a plant over there, but it obstructs it a little bit. And again, like I think selective tariffs are good for selective industries, and the car industry might even be one. To be honest, I'm not sure which specific industries. I know like industries that have to do with weapon manufacturing, our weapons and stuff, should probably be built in the U.S. But a sweeping tariff, I think most people agree is just not a smart economic plan. So, and also like once you put up a tariff, it's very hard to remove them. So, I mean, we'll see what happens. Maybe they'll end up being a really good thing. Who knows? It just doesn't seem like most people who deal with money, like economists and investors and, you know, tax people money people, just don't seem to agree with this plan of his. But we'll see.
I told the story once or twice, so you may have heard it because these speeches have been good. Did you see the one last night?
Yeah,
29,000 people. That was and the one the night before was the same thing. We are rocking and rolling. But Elon, and I'm talking to this very important guy. I said, wait a minute, I'm looking at something. The television's unmuted, right? And I see this rocket. It's all brown from the heat. You know.
All right, yeah, he's told the story. He watches the rocket. He puts somebody on the phone, and they end up waiting on hold for 50 minutes while he's watching the rocket.
Oh,
he was not bad, right? That guy.
Oh, he was phenomenal.
But that's your kind of
your
person.
weave is getting wide. We're getting wide with this weave.
But isn't it
I want to bring it back to tariffs.
But wait one second before we finish with tariffs. So they said, could you get him? We need Starlink. And I call Elon. He got it for him so fast, saved so many lives. And I said, how was it? They said, better than the wires. You know, they couldn't put them in. They were all gone. So I
used it recently in Utah in the mountains.
Did you find it good?
Oh, it's phenomenal. It's the size of like an iPad. You just set it down on the ground. You get high-speed internet. It's incredible.
We're spending, just to show you, we're spending $1 trillion to get cables all over the country, right? Up to upstate areas where you have like 2 farms and they're spending millions of dollars to have
talk about the $42 billion that was wasted on this internet access program. That they didn't get anybody access to internet.
They haven't hooked up one person
Not
yet.
one person. They spent $42 billion. They could have gotten Starlinks to everybody with that kind of money.
For almost nothing.
Yeah.
For a monthly charge.
And it would have been incredible. And it's high-speed internet everywhere you want to go.
And he wanted to do that.
And he wanted to do it.
How about this? They built the charger stations, right? In the Midwest. They built 8 of them. They cost $9 billion. That's like a gas pump, right? They built 9 gas pumps, except electricity comes out. They spent $9 billion. 3 of them don't work. The whole thing, there's so much waste. I could sit here and tell you about things that there's so much waste, abuse, and
Hold
fraud.
on, I go feed my cat.
Yeah, I'm sure.
listening.
I mean, I think everybody's aware of that
Let's
now.
get back to tariffs.
When you're talking about, one of the criticisms of your administration was with tax cuts and with tariffs, you increased the deficit. So what was the strategy behind that? And did you think it was going to increase the deficit by a substantial amount?
Okay, we were ready to rock. It was all, I had a bad system. We had a horrible tax policy. I made it great with a much lower tax rate. So I took it from almost 40% down to 21%. Now I'm bringing it from 21 down to 15, but only if you make your product in the United States, which is great. People call me, they said, what a great idea. Nobody ever heard of that before. I don't care if they make the product in Japan. Why should I give them? So it's at 21. At 21, in the first year, we took in much more revenue than we did at almost 40. Think of that. It inspired. Now, we had other things, too. We were able to get people to bring back their money. You couldn't bring back your money. If you had money in Europe, like Apple, Apple had many billions of dollars outside. They couldn't bring it. There was no way to bring it back in. The bureaucracy, the documents, the whole thing. And also the tax was too high. They wanted like half of it or something. Nobody's going to do that. So they leave their money in Japan and they spend their money there. That was part of what I did. The money came pouring back in. Apple took in hundreds of billions of dollars. They brought it back from overseas. They brought it in.
So how does the deficit increase because of that?
So what happened is this. We were ready to rock and roll, and then we had the COVID thing, and we had to focus on that. And if we didn't give some businesses a hand, you would have had a depression like in 1929. But we were ready to start. We would have very shortly been paying off debt. we have $35 trillion in debt. And I'll never forget it. It was talking about from, the standpoint of being in office. I'm in the Oval Office, and I have John McLaughlin and Fabrizio, the two very good pollsters, probably, I don't know, I would say the two best, who knows, but very good pollsters. And we're starting to think about running for a second term. And we had the greatest economy in history. Never has there been an economy like
And you
this.
attribute that to lowering taxes and tariffs.
Two things. And also I cut regulations more than anybody else. And if I asked many of the businessmen, from the big companies, the guys running the big companies.
Yep. And he's thinking about, I don't know if completely getting rid of, but massively, what's the word? Not obstructing, massively crippling the EPA and the FDA, which, again, I understand there's some issues with the FDA that we all want to get to the bottom to. But, there might be a very big impact on the EPA and the FDA. He's probably going to take us out of the Paris, environmental accord thing that he took us out of last time, his last presidency. A lot of environmental regulations, like all the federal parks were defunded. I'm sorry, national parks. I don't know what's wrong with my words today. Keep twisting my words. All the national parks were defunded and all that stuff. So if you're an environment person, Trump is not the guy for you. And I am a big environment person. Call me silly, whatever. Kind of think it's a big deal to keep our planet safe. And I agree that lots of the green energy shit is bullshit and not helpful and sometimes even more damaging. But I don't think Trump is trying to work towards that direction at all. Make any advances in that direction. So maybe him working with Elon would be kind of a good thing in that aspect. Maybe. But yeah, all these regulations and stuff, a lot of them have to do with the environment and stuff like that.
Companies that say, so if you had your choice, you've had it now for a long time, what's more important to you, the tax cuts, you paid less tax, or the regulation cuts? Every one of them said the regulation cuts meant more. Who would think that, right? Because you don't equate it to dollars, but it actually is more dollars. We had it going, and then we just had to focus on something else. But they were sitting there, these two pollsters were sitting there, and they said, sir, if George Washington came back and Abraham Lincoln was his VP as opposed to Waltz, how bad is he, by the way? But if Abraham Lincoln was his VP, they couldn't beat you. And I'll never forget it. The following day, they said, something's happening in China, sir. Could we meet? I said, what's happening? People are dying. And it was all around the Wuhan lab, by the way. There are pictures with little lines, they're body bags, all around the Wuhan lab. And I always said that from the beginning, Joe. Was, they tried to say, first they said it was France, and they blamed everybody.
Right.
But then they say it was bats from a cave, 2000.
Sorry, I was muted. Okay, caught myself. I've known about the COVID pandemic in China since the November prior to 2020. So I remember at Thanksgiving in 2019 telling my family about this big sickness that is killing a bunch of people in China that people are predicting is going to be a worldwide pandemic. It's going to spread across the globe, and it's going to be a big pandemic. And my family at the Thanksgiving table just kind of ignored me. It's we hear about these things all the time, like Ebola and swine flu and stuff, and it's going to turn into a big pandemic and spread. So that's kind of how they looked at me. That's kind of how I felt at first when I first heard about it, until I started seeing more and more that this seemed pretty serious. So I knew about that from November, prior to November 2019. And Trump is saying from the beginning, they're saying it's this, they're saying it's that. So either he knew about it prior to November 2019 and ignored it all the way until March 2020, or he found out about it late and got a bunch of weird info. Everybody knew it started in China. Like, I just don't know what he's talking about here. This is why I think he's a bullshitter.
Miles away. So we got hit with that, and despite that, we had the best economy. And when I gave it over, the stock market was higher than it was pre-COVID. I mean, nobody could even believe it. But we saved it, and we were helping businesses. They were dying. They were dying.
So it's your belief that if you had a second term, given the policies in place, the way the economy was booming, that you would have been able to pay off a lot of the debt. And that was the strategy.
If we didn't have COVID, we would have been paying off debt, and we would have had. And don't forget, by growth, the word growth is actually more important in a way, because you could have the same debt, but if you double your growth, all of a sudden you're under-levered. But still, we should pay off debt. If you viewed this $35 trillion right now, it's a lot. But if you look at the asset value, if you look at it purely as an asset value, we have oil underground, we have water, we have mountains, the assets are so enormous. But regardless of that, we've got $35 trillion in debt, we should pay it off. And we would have started paying off debt and probably even given further tax reductions. I want to get it down to 15%. We're going to do more business. But when you get hit with a COVID, everything stops, and you have to keep these businesses alive. The businesses were dying. They were just dying. This country was going to die.
Are there influences outside of environmental that keep people from wanting to drill for oil and frack and do those sort of things, outside of the environmental concerns, which are legitimate, of course?
No,
but are there other influences that maybe over-accentuate or over-exaggerate these environmental effects? Are people being influenced in a way where they're trying to keep us from producing American oil?
Yeah. So the environmental is the biggest tool for stopping growth, the biggest tool. The other is regulation. And if you speak to Elon, he said the regulation now to send a rocket up to anywhere, even if you do everything, it's becoming impossible. But they use environmental in order to get people not to do anything. And sometimes I say, I look at some of I know the environmental stuff better because I had to build buildings in New York. I had to do environmental impact studies. And I would see some of these guys that I'd hire for a lot of money, environmentalists that would get you through the process, and they'd be up in Albany, that's the capital of New York, and they're up there trying to make it tougher for guys like me that were builders because they'd get paid more money. In other words, I had one guy, highly recommended. I was good at getting permits. I was one of the kings I was always very good. But the environmental stuff was always horrible. They could slow a project down 10 years, 15 years. I had a project in Louisiana, built big LNG plant. It was for 14 years. It was going to cost $18 billion, one of the biggest, like the Empire State Building, laying down on its side times 4. Massive on the coast, on the Gulf Coast. And they said, sir, they're going to give it up. I said, they shouldn't give it up. What's the problem? They can't get their environmental. They had environmental permits that would fill this whole room up to the ceiling. And they said there was one mistake on one little line. They want them to do it all over again. It's not going to happen. And I got them their permit instantly. And they built the plant. It's massive.
So when you're saying that, there's people that are making money by making it difficult.
Yeah.
Are you talking about lawyers?
No, I'm talking about environmental consultants and lawyers.
Environmental consultants profit off of dragging out the process.
Absolutely.
And how do
make
they
the
profit?
process worse.
How do they profit?
And I'd probably do the same thing if I were them, to be honest with you.
As
I want to be honest with you.
How do they do that? How do they make it?
Let's say New York, they go to Albany.
Okay.
And they convince people that if you have a certain type of plant on the ground that's this big and, in theory, valueless, that it's a rare plant, and you cannot ever even touch it. You can't go near it. You can't put a building on it. You can't do anything. Or there's a little puddle, and they call it a lake, and you have to go by the standards of a lake. I said, no, that's a puddle. Oh, you have no idea. Guys are filling a little puddle. You have no idea what they do. And they use it as a way to stop you.
They use it as a way to stop you, and also as a way to generate money. I'm curious how are they generating money that way, though?
Well, they get fees.
They get fees.
Massive fees.
And
you pay these guys.
People rely on them as experts because they're the people that they go to when they have to run these studies in the first place.
But some of them are just bad guys, and they're trying to make it more and more difficult.
And they have a lot of power.
Yeah, I think they maybe had more. They didn't have as much with me because I would get through them, and I understood it. Look, I've done so many they call it environmental impact study. I did so much to build a building. To build a building in New York is very tough. You got to deal with. Think of it, financing, unions, all the municipal stuff, environmental. Of all of it, to me, the toughest thing was the environmental, because they could stop you cold with the environmental impact study stuff. And you hire a so-called expert. They say, sir, he's the one guy, he can get you through the morass. It's a morass. It's horrible. They use it as a weapon. They use it all over the country.
Right, but there are legitimate concerns about environmental impact, correct? Like, look about the BP oil spill. There's a lot of things that do happen that are environmentally devastating.
Sure, yeah.
And you want to mitigate that as much as possible.
You do. Look, I had, during our 4 years, we had the cleanest air and the cleanest water. I view it differently. I say air and water. Remember this. It costs much more to do things environmentally clean. China doesn't do anything.
Right.
When Kerry goes to see President Xi of China, which he probably doesn't even get to see him, but they look at him, oh, yes, we will do, oh, yes, we're going to do that. No more coal, and then they approve 58 coal plants for the next, they build a coal plant a week. Okay.
They build a lot of coal plants.
But let me just tell you, though, so here we are cleaning and scrubbing everything, and everything's got, and the air's got to be pure. But in 3.8 days, that stuff floating over China is right over the top of us.
Right.
Same thing with the oceans. They dump their garbage into the Pacific Ocean. If you take
so I guess that means we just shouldn't care about the environment ourselves either, right? And just do absolutely nothing because money matters more.
a little cork and put it there, in about a week and a half it'll be in front of Los Angeles. We're picking up their garbage. So nobody ever talks about that. But in a way, the bigger one is even the air. It's the currents. It's an amazing thing. It's been flowing that way for 1,000,000 years, or long before.
We
long
share
before
air
we
with the
were
whole
there.
world. Yeah.
No, if we're
We get
cleaning,
the Sahara dust clouds over here.
Absolutely.
We get dust clouds in Austin from the Sahara Desert.
But we get the China, they call it the China curse. We get the China curse. They're bad, and their air is dirty. When I went there, I had a great relationship with President Xi. We got along very well. And they treated me better than anybody has ever been treated. Same thing with Saudi Arabia, a number of them. But they laid it out. And I said, this air is good. Do you know they closed
the rest
every
of the
factory
segment
1
is
week
this
before I
China
got there,
curse?
from within 200 miles.
There's
That's
no
like
way.
what
They
Gavin
just had to
Newsom did
stop
when Gigi-
putting timestamps in, right?
Hell is going to pay $4 billion. And they made like a great deal. I mean,
it's
because
worth a
of
lot more
him.
than that now.
Take him
Yeah.
out, I think it's a whole different
No.
ball.
He's the best
And he's
promoter
also
of
the
all time.
greatest guy. He spoke at the whole thing with, I had just been shot, and he got up and he spoke so better than anybody. I mean, who would be better to introduce, except it's massive. The thing's 5 times taller than your ceiling.
Did you know the center of California was a giant lake?
They have so much water.
You ever see what it looked like before
No,
they rerouted
I never
it?
saw that,
The
no.
center of California, like, what is it, 200?
See, he just sees everything as an asset. It's so. California used to be a giant lake. They have so much water. He's saying like we have so many mountains and all these great assets to set off our deficit.
Congo. We have a lot from the Congo. Prisons in the Congo.
Oh God, here
I
we go.
made a little bit of a sarcastic joke. A man named Dana White, who you love, who I love. I assume you love him.
Love that dude.
I think he's in a class by him.
He's probably the reason why you're here.
I don't know, maybe.
He's one of the big ones.
He is the greatest guy.
I love him
I
to
always
death.
say,
Is this why they had
nobody's
Dana White?
indispensable. Everybody can be replaced. Maybe you can't be. You might not be.
At
But
the election
Dana White,
celebration
truly, I don't
speech?
think, the things he sold it for $4 billion. I said, what the hell? Who the hell is going to pay $4 billion? And they made like a great deal. I mean,
it's worth
because
a lot
of
more
him.
than that now.
Take him
Yeah.
out. I think it's a whole different.
No,
ballgame.
he's the best
And he's
promoter
also
of
the
all time.
greatest guy. He spoke at the whole thing with, I had just been shot, and he got up and he spoke so better than anybody. I mean, who would be better to introduce you? I asked of all the people, and I know the biggest people.
Okay. With you.
You done?
Okay, I'm gonna end the stream a little early. My boyfriend is feeling dizzy and I'm worried about him, and he insists that I shouldn't stop, but I'm worried, so I'm going to end the stream here and maybe finish this up later. To be honest, I feel like I've gotten pretty much the gist of this anyways. My mind has not changed. Is pretty much more confirmed. This is nothing eye-opening or I don't know, this just isn't that amazing. So I'm gonna end it here. Thank you, everybody. Please like the stream, all that jazz, and I'm probably gonna be done with like politics stuff coming up. I'm gonna get back more into like philosophy debates, like more feminism, relationship stuff, and back onto all that. So yeah, stay tuned. Here's my outro song. Bye. Song. Bye.